If I asked you what was in my hand right now, you might say nothing. It seems obvious. My hand is empty. But could there have been nothing at all? Not just here, but anywhere. Philosophers, scientists, and the greatest minds of humanity have wrestled with this question for centuries, yet none have come to a conclusive answer. So today, it's our turn to ask the question. Hello everybody, my name is Neev, and today I hope to give you some insight into the question, could there have been nothing rather than something? To start off with, we have to define some key points of the question. What does it mean to be? What is nothing? Taking the first one, we might think being, colloquially, means to exist physically in some way. I want to suggest something more abstract. For example, take the number 3. We can't hold or touch the number in any way, yet it exists. It can participate in equations, we can use it to launch a rocket, we can use it to split a bill. So it exists. Similarly, take a possibility, for example, the chance of it raining tomorrow. While the possibility isn't physical in any way, it still impacts us. It still causes us to maybe take an umbrella out tomorrow. The heart of this is that being ultimately relates to causal relationships. Can it relate to something else in some way, whether that something else is physical or non-physical? So that wasn't too bad to define. But what about nothing? This is a much more complex topic, and over this talk, I want to go over 3 areas of how we can define nothing. The quantum physics definition, in the work of Parmenides on the logic of non-being, and a more metaphysical perspective. Taking the quantum physics version, in quantum physics, you usually think of nothingness as a vacuum, a place where there's nothing, or at least nothing physical. So we might colloquially say that's nothing. But even then, that vacuum is a highly structured space governed by the mathematical laws of quantum field theory. It has fields running through it, and these fields have energy. This energy gives rise to virtual particles, which in turn give rise to effects like the Casimir effect. So we have causal relationships going on. And referring back to our previous definition, that is being. There's not nothing. So we've taken the stance that quantum physics can't answer it. Modern science can't answer it. But I want to go further. I want to say that not only can modern science not answer it, but even taking the root of modern science is incorrect. In the 1930s, Karl Popper put forward his demarcation theory, where he argued that a statement is only scientific if it's A, empirically verifiable, and B, falsifiable. But how are we supposed to test if there could have been nothing? How are we supposed to falsify it? This question is simply beyond science. Now, moving on to the work of Parmenides. So while modern physics tried to answer this question and failed, over 2,000 years ago, philosophy also asked the question, and the pre-Socratic philosopher Parmenides tried to answer it. So he argued that non-being is actually impossible, and his stance behind it can be highlighted in his poem on nature, where he writes what's often translated to as that which is not cannot be known nor uttered. I think there's a lot of beauty in his logic. To speak of nothing is to speak of the concept of nothing, and that concept is something. So maybe Parmenides is right. Maybe nothingness simply isn't possible. But logical formalists argue against this. They say that at least symbolically, we can represent nothing. But I disagree. I think that when we represent nothing symbolically, this only exists within a set of rules and axioms, an interpretive framework that requires it to be something. So I think logical formalism fails here. Shifting onto the more metaphysical heart of the problem. What if existence itself was contingent? What if I didn't have to exist? What if you didn't have to exist? What if the universe itself didn't have to exist? This seems more intuitive and more correct. But there's a problem here. For something to be contingent, there has to be a possible world in which the opposite is true. For example, I'm giving this talk today, but that's contingent. There is another possible world in which I'm not giving this talk. Philosophers like David Lewis argued for modal realism, where these possible worlds are just as real as ours. And in fact, there's nothing special about our world except for the fact that we inhabit it. So if we ask this question under a Lewisian standpoint, then what we're saying is that there's a possible world in which nothing exists. There's a situation where situations themselves can't exist. But that's a contradiction in the statement itself. So maybe Lewis is wrong. Maybe we can't ask this question under his framework. What if we take a step back and look at primitive modality, where we argue that possibility itself is baked into reality, it's a fundamental property of it. So is nothingness possible then? It's still not, because to even have the possibility of nothing existing, we must have a feature of reality, and that feature is something. So if existence itself was contingent, we still couldn't have nothing. So how do we get around this? Fundamentally, I don't think we can. And this is what I term the bootstrapping problem. By asking if we can exist, or if existence itself was contingent, we're trying to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. The very tools that we require to say existence is contingent require existence in the first place. It's like trying to pull ourselves up with our own laces. We don't get anywhere. So we've traveled through physics, metaphysics, and logic, yet we still haven't come to a conclusive answer. Why is that? Well, I think that perhaps it's not because nothingness is contingent, but in fact, we have to think about a couple aspects to the question. We can't question nothingness. We can't question existence while being within it. We can't question if there could have been nothing while stepping out of reality. Because the very tools that we need to question existence themselves require it. Existence precludes non-existence. So, what's in my hand? Maybe it's not nothing. Maybe it's the only thing it could have ever been, something. And maybe the reason that we can't imagine nothing, true nothingness, is not because our imagination is limited. Maybe it's because nothingness was never an option. Thank you.